How many of you are excited to be here, felt his presence, just enjoyed loving on him and having him love on you? Amen. How many realize that sometimes we can get so caught up in the week, in life, in the world, in all kinds of things that we don't always take the time because we have responsibilities, we have things to take care of, we have things that require our focus. But that's why Shabbat is so important, because he says all that has to cease. Don't do any of that. It all has to stop. It all has to be quiet. Why? Because you need this moment to truly just listen, to sit at the feet, to be loved on, to love on him, and to realize and be restored. This is why you were created. Everything else is just noise. Everything else is just distractions. But this is why we were created. Amen? And that's something that is so powerful to me about the season we currently find ourselves in. We're in the season still of the counting of the Omer. How many of you enjoying the counting of the Omer, right? Counting of the Omer is a really fun season. I found that throughout the years, both from the example we see in the scriptures and even in our own lives, when you go back and you begin to look over the years that we've been through, the counting of the Omer season, the Sefirat HaOmer, is the season of the wilderness. How many realize you can't get to Shavuot without going through the wilderness? Shavuot specifically was to be held in the wilderness. In fact, when Moses tells Pharaoh, let my people go, and he's going through, like, we're gonna take everything and we're gonna journey. Why? We're gonna journey into the wilderness to hold a feast, to hold a convocation, to hold a gathering. Why? Shavuot doesn't take place in Egypt. Shavuot doesn't take place in the midst of your current circumstances, wherever you are. Shavuot requires a wilderness journey, a counting of the Omer, to experience what Shavuot's truly about. And when you begin to understand these patterns, you'll realize, wow, the wilderness seasons take on new meaning. Because how many of you know, if we're honest, we don't like the wilderness seasons? The wilderness season is marked by the seasons of uncomfortableness. The wilderness season is marked by the times when you're wondering, have you forgotten me? Why am I still here? It's marked by the seasons where you're not really for sure, you're in the in-between, so to speak. And I found that the wilderness seasons is when you really find out what's in here. He already knew it. That's why he stuck you there, by the way. But you'll find out, my goodness, that was still in there. Where did that come from? Because it takes these types of situations, the pressure and the molding and the shaping, that all of a sudden, maybe you looked really good on this side. I've been working on this side. This side looks really nice. And then you enter the wilderness season and circumstances begin to happen in your life, and all of a sudden that light just turns and shines over here, a corner that you really weren't focusing on. And a corner that, there's still some stuff. There's still some things that need to be dealt with, and all of a sudden, he's shining the light on that corner. Well, I thought we were going to look over here. I want you to look over here at all these things that I've been working on, though, and the areas that I've matured and I've grown. But he says, no. Let's go look over here. Let's deal with this area in your life. And I found throughout the years that, especially in this cycle, this year, I've begun to appreciate the wilderness season a lot more. And I've realized, my goodness, in the past, it was a season that was marked by complaining. It was a season marked by questions. Why? Galilee's favorite word, why? And yet, how apropos that us still, as his children, why? But why? I don't want to. And here we find ourselves over halfway through this season. There's 2 weeks left. My goodness, we still got a lot of work to do, don't we? We've went through 5 weeks, but we still got 2 left. It's crunch time now. How many of you wait till the last minute to prepare for a test or an exam? You got 2 weeks left. I don't know what you've been doing with the other 5, but you got 2 weeks. And in this 2 weeks, he's waiting to see a bride that's going to present herself, who has made herself ready, whose garments are ready. And how many of you realize that sometimes it's a lot of work to get those garments ready? And I had a conversation with Pastor David, maybe it was last week. I'm going to tell him myself. And it was funny to me, and I admitted to him, and he probably already knew it too. I said years ago when first coming into the ministry and being taught under you, there was times where you would tell me certain things regarding how a situation was supposed to be handled. And that was the last thing I wanted to hear. That's not how I wanted to do it. That's not what I wanted to be told in that situation, but you're the boss. So I was obedient and I did it. And through the years, I'm like, oh yeah, I've got that down. I did it. And yet it's been this year that I feel like the Father began to show me, my goodness, I was being obedient. That's part of Shema. It's part of hearing. You got that part down. But you know, there's a level of maturation that he takes you into when you begin to Shema, to hear. That yes, you're obedient. Yes, you listen. But then through maturity, you will get understanding. And so now I've begun to realize, my goodness, the very lessons that, to be honest, I don't want to hear. I don't want to do that. My flesh is saying, I want to do this. And you're telling me the opposite. And that's uncomfortable, and I don't want to do that. But I'm obedient to do it. And now as I look back, my goodness, the very lessons that I didn't want to learn, the very things that were uncomfortable, I now have an appreciation for it. And that's called maturity. I can now appreciate those lessons. And so years ago when I thought, oh yeah, I've got that lesson down pat. I'm doing it. I've been doing it now for this many years. My goodness, how much more am I going to have to put this lesson into practice? And then this year I've realized, my goodness, wow, now I appreciate and I understand and I value it. And I don't know if he's doing that in any of your lives. Maybe it's just me. But that's the season that I've been in. And I'm like, my goodness, thank you for the wilderness seasons. Thank you for the counting of the Omer. Thank you for growth and maturity. It sure don't feel good when you're doing it. But now once you begin to go through this, you begin to realize, wow, now I understand, because guess what? Those lessons aren't learned anywhere else. That growth doesn't happen in any other type of situation. It takes those growing pains, so to speak. And this year as I began to look, I couldn't get away from I taught on counting the Omer the last time, but I just couldn't get away from it, because yes, we're counting the Omer. Yes, we're understanding this season that we're going through, but how many realize this is all in preparation for Shavuot? This is something that he has in store for you. Part 2. This is something that he has for you. This is why we're going through this. This is why he's forming you and shaping you, and whatever stuff's going on in your life, I have no idea, but whatever stuff that is, now you can begin, wait a minute, wow. Maybe that's to help me grow in this area, because there's something that he has for me on the horizon that I have to mature. I have to grow. I have to be ready to take this and handle it, because if I'm not, then maybe once again, I'm going to take another trip around that mountain. And so as I begin to look at this, the Feast of Shavuot, it's already an interesting convocation, because it's the only one that has this type of commandment associated with it. You count the days. You count 50 days. You're going to need those 50 days to get ready for this. And this is the only feast that we see this specifically stated in the scriptures, that this is embedded into his feast cycles. Shavuot is the 4th Moedim of the 7 that are listed in Leviticus 23. And when you look at this, you'll realize 7 immediately, Pastor Shepherd John was already talking about it, it's the menorah, the 7-branched menorah. So immediately when you see these feasts, 7 of them, it's 7 lights. It's the menorah. It's shining. It's illuminating. It's revealing something. It's covenant. It's his light. It's who he is. And so when we begin to look at these feasts, the 4th one being Shavuot, when you go and you look at the description of the menorah, the center shaft is the 4th branch. It's the one that's holding the other. 3 on this side and 3 on this side. And that center branch, the 4th one, is the center shaft of this menorah. Therefore, the center shaft of this feast cycle menorah is Shavuot. So now all of a sudden I begin to look at Shavuot a little differently. It's not just the 4th in this lineup. Oh, we're over halfway through. We almost made it through. Woohoo. Instead, now I begin to understand, wait a minute, there's something about Shavuot that is literally upholding what I've just went through. Passover, unleavened bread, Feast of Early First Fruits, and also where I'm headed. Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. And so when we understand that we're looking at these feasts through the lens of the menorah, and we see that these branches are on either side, then that begins to reveal to us that what happens prior to Shavuot, And what happens afterwards is supported, upheld, and all revolving around what takes place at this feast. In other words, to truly understand my deliverance and my redemption, why were we redeemed? Why were we delivered? Why did he bring you out of whatever he brought you out of? Just to say he could? And then, okay, brings you out, drops you off. All right, see ya. Or did he bring you out for a purpose, a reason? My goodness, now we begin to understand, wait a minute, there's a destination, there's a direction, there's a reason for this that's taking place in our lives. He brings you out, he delivers you, and then he lets you know, oh, by the way, you got to clean up. You got to clean up the house. You got to clean out that old leaven. You got to clean out all that stuff. That's got to get out. And then at Yom HaBikurim, it's everything that deals with resurrection, new life, transformation. You're being transformed into a new creation. And all of this we find is being upheld and transpiring. Why? Because it's leading you to a set destination. And it seems as if that set destination is encapsulated in Shavuot. And then we look at the other end of the spectrum, the crowning of the king, Yom Teruah, the union of the two at Yom Kippur, and the wedding feast of Sukkot seems to then indicate that all of this is also being upheld, supported. It's the fruit that's being born out of what should take place at Shavuot. And as I begin to look at it through that lens, we have to ask the question, could this be why we are instructed to safar, to count the days? Truly take the time to understand and prepare for what is on the horizon? Do you think that maybe if I haven't taken the time to renew my mind, to prepare myself, that I might approach and end up at Shavuot not looking like I'm supposed to, not ready for whatever it is he wants to entrust us with? Israel showed up through the wilderness journey, a people marked by 50 days of complaining. 50 days of rejection of the very one that had just redeemed them. 50 days of asking the question, why? Why did you bring us out in the wilderness? Did you bring us out here just to die? And so you find that, oh my goodness, and then we begin to look back over our own 50 days. How many times was I in that same category? Why in the world am I having to deal with this? Why is this happening in my life? Why am I experiencing this? And that's why I'm so thankful. My goodness, how many realize this generation, we got it a lot better off than they did. We get to look at their example and we get to say, wow, that's where they missed it. Now I can look and I can understand, and this word can become a lamp unto my path, and it can help give me direction and understanding so that now when we approach this same mountain, when we approach this same feast cycle, I can look at the examples in the past and be like, okay, I'm going to learn from that lesson. Amen? Now in Exodus chapter 25, verse 31 through verse 40, we're given the details of the menorah. And since we're comparing the feast cycle, these 7 feasts, to this menorah, we're going to just take a moment and look at the description that he provides regarding the menorah. Because how many realize he's very detailed when it comes to what's being placed in his tabernacle, how his tabernacle is going to be built, the furnishings and the instruments that are going to be put in there. He gives the details. And so let's look at the details of this menorah. In Exodus chapter 25, verse 31, they're told, and thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold, of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side. And it goes on and continues to describe in detail this candlestick or menorah. And so we've connected the fact that this 4th feast, Shavuot, is dealing with that central shaft of the menorah. In Hebrew, when you look at that term, his shaft and his branches, the word shaft there, describing this 4th light, is called yorek. It's Strong's number 3409, and it's translated as meaning thigh, side, loin, or base. And this term is first seen in Genesis chapter 24, verse 2, when Abraham instructs Eliezer to place his hand under his thigh, his yorek, and to swear an oath regarding finding the bride for Isaac, the promised son. And this becomes the foundational passage that lays out something that they would have been very familiar with, and it was called the yorek oath. an oath that was entered into between Abraham and Eliezer that dealt with him placing his hand. And yet when we look at the context of this oath was sworn about finding a bride that would be fit for the promised son. Do you think that perhaps this lays the groundwork regarding the role of Shavuot? An oath entered into, once again, regarding a fit helpmeet, a fit bride that will be selected and chosen for the promised son. This time, not Isaac, but the one that Isaac was representing, a shadow picture of, the Messiah, who will be identified or revealed through this feast. And so now we can begin to understand, my goodness, what's the role of Shavuot? It's that light shining, looking, waiting, attempting to find and scouring the earth, looking for the one that will be a fit helpmeet, the one that will be the bride of the Messiah, the one that will be considered a part of this company. And in the book of Revelation, it talks about this individual. It describes her garments, and it says she's made herself ready. And so now we can say, my goodness, thank you for the 50 days. Why? It's the season where she's making herself ready. It's the season she's being prepared. She's being washed. She's being cleansed. She's being garmented. Why? Because he's about to go and look and see who's the fit helpmeet. Amen? And now when you look at this term, Yerek, it indicates the area of the loins or the seed line, the seat of procreative power. And so when Eliezer is commanded to place his hand here to take this oath, it is demonstrating the authority to act on behalf of the founder of the house in regard to his seed. And this is what's being invested into this individual when he enters into this oath. In other words, Eliezer is now functioning in the capacity that he has authority. He has the power. He has the ability to go and to make these decisions and to act according, understanding the mind of the father, Abraham, who's entrusting him with this. And I thought it was quite interesting that this same area, the Yerek, the thigh, is what the angel touches when wrestling with Jacob in Genesis chapter 32, which results in Jacob's limp. He walks different, simultaneously with receiving a name change to Israel when he's touched in the thigh. And so when we begin to look at this, now you can understand that it indicates not only is Yahweh choosing who he's going to invest his authority in regarding his house, that's who he's looking for, one that will be entrusted with his seed, his word, the authority to act upon his house, to see his house built and formed, but also that in this covenant process, Jacob in turn is entrusting his house into the hands of Yahweh because it's his thigh that's touched. And so when that messenger, that encounter, his thigh is touched, it's now indicating, Jacob, not only am I entrusting my house to you, the seed, to the ability to see my house built, I'm entrusting this into your care, but also in turn, you're going to have to entrust your house to me, into my care. And that's the same thing I believe we see mirrored in the life of Abraham when he tells him, look at the stars, so shall your seed be. This is going to be the destiny, the destination of your house, if you will entrust it into my care. And so now as we prepare for Shavuot and we begin to connect these dots, a much clearer view comes into place regarding the significance of this feast. Because now I can understand, my goodness, it's the Yerek, it's the thigh. It's about a covenant cutting process where he's looking to find one that's capable, that he can entrust the affairs of his house to. And that's a big responsibility. And you begin to realize, my goodness, when I look at my own path and I look behind me, have I made more messes or have I built more? Have I been one that's left a path of destruction or have I been one that the fruit shows, wow, yes, that's the fruit of the type of relationship. That's the creating of an atmosphere and a place worthy to house his presence. And we find that he's looking for one that's capable of coming alongside as a helpmeet to build his house. And yet in order to be one that's considered an option for that, I have to be willing to say, Hineni. I'm going to entrust all that I am, all of my house, all those that may be connected to me, and all the places that I may go in the future. I'm going to trust you. So when you tell me to go in the wilderness and you tell me to walk one step in front of the other, I'm going to be willing to do that. And it seems to infer that maybe on this journey, I'll cease to ask why. and I'll start to understand why. Amen? And so we find that this feast, Shavuot, will identify the chosen bride who will be a fit helpmeet, while simultaneously revealing that the one who fits this standard is going to be entrusted with the authority to act on behalf of Yahweh on the earth, regarding the building and the forming of his house. And so you can begin to understand his people, his bride, should be a powerhouse. She should be an individual that walks in authority, that walks in his name, that walks in power. Why? Because she's been entrusted with it. And when we look around and we say, well, my goodness, the church isn't really walking in that authority. As believers, we're not really seeing that power. We're not seeing this manifestation of his authority and his dominion. And then we might ask ourselves, well, wait a minute, maybe it's because I'm not yet trusted just yet to actually have that. And so now I can begin to say, wow, okay. But once again, we go back to the pattern. It doesn't mean you'll never be entrusted with it, but it means follow the pattern. Walk out one step in front of the other, because this is what's in front of you. This is what he intends for you. Amen? And so now we can understand that, my goodness, is it any wonder we can't simply jump from Passover and the other early spring feasts? How many realize how busy those spring feasts get initially? There's so much happening. We're celebrating Passover. Now we're immediately into unleavened bread. In the midst of unleavened bread, we're doing Yom HaBikurim. And then we got to start the Omer count. It's very busy. I try to fit it all in 1 week on a little calendar square. Trying to let you know this is everything that's got to happen right now. And then all of a sudden it just slows down. And then you enter this span of 50 days, 7 weeks. And it seems as if we're not careful, well, not much is happening now. You know, we had all this excitement. We had all these things that were taking place. We had the plagues, and we're delivered out, and the Red Sea's parted, and all of these manifestations of the power and who he is. And now we're just wandering around in the wilderness. And it's quiet. And we find that where he took us from, usually he shuts the door so you can't go back anyway. That door's shut. So you can either choose to keep going forward, or you could try to wander off somewhere else and get off the path. But in the meantime, you're in this place of the in-between, waiting for what he's promised, but not yet seeing it. How many realize the most uncomfortable place to be? When he first tells you, it's exciting. When you have it, it's great. In the in-between, him telling you and you seeing it is the most uncomfortable place you will ever be in your walk as a believer. And it's the time where your faith begins to be tested. It's a time where you grow. It's a time where he begins to do the work inside of us that cannot be done outside of that season. And so now we can understand. That's why he doesn't just jump from Passover immediately to Shavuot. Now I delivered you. Now I'm going to empower you. Here's all the authority and dominion. Whatever you say, whatever you want to do, here it is. Can you imagine the type of nation Israel would have been if they had gotten all the authority immediately upon crossing the Red Sea? Because just because they had the authority or didn't, it didn't change what was in here. It didn't change the grumbling, the complaining. It didn't change the frustrations. It didn't change the slave mindset. It didn't change the habits that they had cultivated for years. And so in his infinite understanding, we now, my goodness, he's a lot smarter than we are. I want it now. I don't think you do. And so he gives us this season. Why? Because if I entrust you with it now, I already can see the results of that. And you won't appreciate the results of that if I give it to you now. And so he allows us to go through these seasons of growth. Why? Because there has to be an identity change. The individual that was delivered at Passover, the individual that first came out of Egypt, has to have an identity change. We have to learn how to walk different. And when we begin to walk different, then you'll find that he begins to entrust you with aspects of his authority, his power, his identity. Why? Because now you're a fit vessel that's capable of handling these characteristics, handling these things. And how many realize that sometimes he'll start off giving you just a little? Just get a taste of it. Let's see what you do with that. And then how we respond, how we steward that. Then he'll say, okay, you've stewarded that well. So now I can entrust you with more because you've begun to prove yourself. And so as we look at this, we find that this season not only prepares us to handle the affairs of his house, but how many realize it's also revealing how much we're willing to release and trust regarding our own. That's the purpose of the wilderness. Now, as we look at this example, the menorah, the center shaft, it's the urek, it's the thigh. It's about being entrusted with responsibility regarding the building of a house. We already stated the fact that you see this same covenant cutting process taking place with Jacob. In Genesis chapter 32, verse 31, it says, after Jacob has his thigh touched, it says, and as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. And when we look at that from the English, we're like, well, Jacob just walked with the limp. And that's all we get from that. Jacob walked with the limp. Poor Jacob. And yet in the Hebrew, it begins to describe some things quite differently that shows you the intention of why that thigh was touched, of why Jacob's walk is different. The word halted in the Hebrew, it's Strong's number 6760, salah, and it means to limp, to be lame, to incline to one side. The same root stem, though, is seen in the word selah, which means rib, side, or beam. It's what's taken from the side of Adam to build the bride. And so when he's described that he walks with a limp, a selah, it's literally indicating there's the rib. There's the one that I took out of the side of Adam that I'm going to use to build my house with. And so Jacob's walk was identifying him as one considered a proper helpmeet, capable of building the house. And so now you can begin to understand, my goodness, this was the whole purpose of this encounter that Jacob is having here. And we have to ask the question, especially during this season, what does our walk say about us? And it can be a sobering question because it causes me to look back here. We're in week 5. We got 2 weeks left. It causes me to look back at the previous 5 weeks. What was I doing? Where have I been? And then I go back even further and I look, oh my goodness, last year, what was I doing during the season and the year before? And it causes me to begin to look at some things a little differently, and it gives me a perspective. But also, hopefully, as believers, if we're shemaing, if we're listening, we can also find hope and excitement. Wow, I'm better than I was last year. I may not have arrived yet, but I can say this area I have worked on and I can see some growth. And how many realize that's encouraging? Because in the midst of it, when it don't feel good, you're just like, what in the world is happening? But then finally, when you get on the other side and you see that it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. I can see some growth. I can see some change. Wow, that's amazing. Now let's continue to look at this. Here in Exodus chapter 25, it was interesting to me because the word urek, shaft, is written as yerekah. And it's translated in our King James Version English as his shaft. In fact, the entire description of the menorah in the English uses the masculine terminology. Yet, did you realize menorah is a feminine Hebrew word? And therefore, all the descriptions as well are feminine. So when you see this term yerekah, it does not translate as his shaft or his thigh. It translates as her shaft or her thigh. And it was something that caught my attention, and it was an interesting point because so often, I know for me personally and a lot of us as believers, we've often looked at the menorah solely through the view and the lens as the role of Messiah. He's the light of the world. It's a representation of who he is. And it is. He's the menorah. He's the source of light. And yet, how many realize that there can be two different perspectives when you're looking at the same thing? And it can, if you turn it just a little, now you see a different angle to it. And you're like, oh, wow, wait, there's more to this. There's more that's being revealed here. And so not only is it a representation of the Messiah, his role, who he is, but could it also reveal aspects of the one who is to be his mirror, the bride? And so do you think that perhaps he specifically chose this term menorah and chose for it to be a feminine term to describe characteristics of the one that would in turn also be a light? just as he was the light. And so it seems to further connect the dots that this is in fact about choosing the helpmeet, the bride, who will house his light, his seed, his word within her as she is entrusted with this authority and position at the appointed time of Shavuot or Pentecost. Do you think that perhaps this is why there's both fire on the mountain and fire in the upper room at the two key places that we see encounters, Shavuot or Pentecost encounters? That fire was intended to sit, to rest, to literally come upon the one that had been gathered that was to be the menorah and to keep that fire burning and go forth with it. Let's look at this term menorah. It's Strong's number 4501, and it's translated as meaning a lampstand. But it comes from the root Strong's number 5216, near, also translated as lamp. But it's identical to the root stem near in Hebrew, which means to break up, to freshly plow, to till, to break up the ground with a plow. A lot of us are in the season where it's gardening season, and what do you have to do? You're having to break up the ground, and it's a lot of work. You know, he uses that same example to describe how we're to break up this fallow ground of our hearts. And it's a lot of work. Man, we got some stony ground sometimes, and you got to get in and you got to break that up. Why? It's the time of a tilling. It's the time of plowing. It's the time of things being broken up. Why? Because seed's about to be planted. Something's about to be put in. It's the ground being prepared to receive something. In fact, it was interesting to me that this term near, to plow, to break up the ground, it's used idiomatically to mean to make a field shine, to glisten. It just shines, that freshly broken up ground, to divide ground. And the same terminology near that describes both the action of plowing the ground, it also describes the action of light or fire splitting or dividing the air. And so now you can begin to understand, what does a lamp have to do with plowing the ground? Both of them are dealing with actions where something's being divided, something's being plowed through, something's being split apart. And so when we see this term menorah, it attaches the mem prefix to this root near. The mem prefix indicates the action of something being produced from or out of whatever it's attached to. In other words, the bride is produced or born out of from this dividing by fire. And I thought, my goodness, isn't that amazing? Because the whole time that we're in the midst of the fiery furnace, the whole time we're in the midst of the circumstances where things, it seems as if you're in this place of pressure, we complain about being in the midst of the fire. We want out of this place. We want out of this place of refining. And yet the entire word picture that he's revealing regarding the menorah, the bride, she's born out of that. And so we find that the definition of near, to divide or split by fire or light, is the same imagery, I believe, that Abram is shown in Genesis chapter 15. First, I believe he's told to look toward heaven regarding the message written where this pattern is first seen. The sun, the fire, the light, plowing across the sky, dividing with fire or light. In fact, it's seen in the Hebrew term boker, morning. It literally indicates as well to plow, to divide. And so Abram's shown this, the sky being divided by the fiery light. And then in turn, it's implemented on the earth as the smoking furnace and burning lamp walks between the covenant of the pieces. It's all the same imagery, the same pattern. The menorah, what's the menorah? It's born from or out of something being divided by fire, pieces being presented, and a fire now being present in the midst of it. I believe this same pattern once again can be traced to when Adam's side is divided to produce the Isha, woman. Isha comes from the root stem esh, fire. It's the same pattern again and again. The bride, a covenant being cut, being divided or birthed from the fire, so to speak. And the same pattern is seen at Sinai as the fiery voice walks on the twin peaks of Sinai and Horeb. Once again, pieces, something that's divided, something that's been plowed apart. Why? It's preparing to receive something. And then there is the presence of the light and the fire that begins to walk. So in Abram's encounter, when we look at this, when he's shown this, the same symbolic meaning that I believe we see in the word menorah, the light source or the source of fire in Abram's encounter in Genesis 15, it's referred to as a smoking furnace and a burning lamp. In Hebrew, the term for furnace is called tanur, furnace, oven, fire pot. It's a masculine noun from the same root stem as menorah, near. But tanur is masculine. Menorah is feminine. And so now when we see this and we begin to connect these dots, could this be presenting the husband, the masculine match to the bride represented by the feminine term menorah? When looking at each word's prefix letters to this root stem near or nur, tanur, the one that's walking between the pieces, cutting this covenant, providing the source of fire that the menorah is going to be lit from, born from, out of, it adds the tav prefix. When you look at the term menorah, it adds the mem prefix. These two letters together, the tav mem root, form the Hebrew word meaning completeness, integrity, nothing lacking, wholesome, sound. It indicates that in the union of the two becoming one again, echad, the Messiah and his bride, Adam and Isha, that they are whole, they're complete, they're sound, there's nothing lacking. Why? Because he willingly took characteristics of himself and placed them in her, requiring the two to become one, to come together. Why? In order to see the house and the kingdom built. It would take the two. And so when Abraham is shown this tanur walking between the pieces, this fire, the picture doesn't end there. Why? Because from this fiery furnace that's walking between the pieces to cut a covenant, something's going to be born from this, a menorah, who will become a recipient of the seed, fire, and light. Why? So that the two together will see the kingdom built. Amen? In addition to this mem prefix on the word menorah, you'll find that it also adds the hey suffix to this root stem. And when you add that hey suffix to that root that we just looked at, tav mem, it forms the Hebrew word tamah. It's Strong's number 8539, and I thought it was comical, really, because it means to marvel, to wonder, to amaze, or to astound. It carries the sense of being surprised at something unexpected. It seems this is the exact response to Yahweh's choice to separate these two, requiring both the Messiah and the bride to take active part and responsibility in order to be whole. Why? Because he willingly chooses to give her that chance, that option, to wait on her also to come and be ready to see this built, to see this completed, to see this made whole. And perhaps it's shocking to us too when we realize, my goodness, the areas in my life that maybe I'm not seeing my answer, my breakthrough, my release, whatever it is in your life that I'm waiting on. And now as I begin to look at this pattern, perhaps maybe it's because I'm the one that's not ready. Maybe I'm the one that's not yet presented this ground broken up, ready to receive that. And so now I can understand, perhaps maybe I need to do a little bit more work on my part. And that once I'm ready and he's ready and the two become one, then we can stand in faith and patience and trust, knowing that in due season it will come forth when it's supposed to. Amen? Now, lending further credence to this pattern, because it seems if it continues, how many realize that Yahweh works in patterns? Why? Because sometimes it takes us a while to get it. If you don't get it from this picture, maybe this one will look, maybe you'll get this one. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to circle back and then I'm going to give you another option, because each of us are different. Each of us see different things. Each of us understand different ways. And so he works in patterns and cycles. Why? So that if you miss the first 5, maybe you'll get this one. And maybe you got that one, but now all of these others, wow, it enhances that. And now I can see and understand. And so when we continue to look, you'll find that this pattern, once again, is seen in regards to the commands surrounding the half shekel. The commanded ransom price when counted. In Exodus chapter 30, verse 13, it says, "This they shall give, everyone that passeth among them that are numbered, half a shekel after the shekel of the sanctuary. A shekel is 20 gerahs, a half shekel shall be the offering of Yahweh." And you'll find that when Israel was to be numbered, it dealt with having access to his presence. It dealt with having valid access to the tabernacle. They were numbered and they had to declare their lineage. They had to declare whose house, their pedigree. And so that then as their pedigree is declared, it's official. Yes, you're of this house. You belong. You have rightful access to this house. But in addition to declaring their pedigree, they were required to bring a half shekel. And that half shekel then, when they were counted, that half shekel would ensure that there was no plague or destruction that would break out upon Israel. Now, the sages teach that when Yahweh revealed this command to Moshe, that he showed him an image of a fiery coin taken from beneath his throne, revealing to Moshe that the Israelites were only to give half, because this was the other half that they were joining it to, indicating each one was incomplete without the sacrifice and the dedication of the other. So we think, oh, I only got to give half. I ain't got to give it all. No, you are half. So literally you are giving all that you are, but the image is that you're not whole anyways without him. And so you give all that you are, you're the half. And then he's giving all that he is. He's the other half. And the two together now become one. Amen. Now let's look at this term shekel. It's Strong's number 8255, shekel, and it's translated as a unit of weight or measurement. But breaking this term apart, it's written Shin Kuf Lamed. The letter Shin represents fire. It's something that has the ability to consume and transform, to change. It's connected to Kuf Lamed, coal, voice. This same coal or voice is present at Sinai on the mountain at Shavuot. So when you see this term shekel, it's literally the fiery voice. And now you can understand why Israel said to Moses, you go up. You go meet with the coal, the voice. Why? It's a fiery voice. And if we encounter and we listen much longer to that voice speaking to us, it's going to consume. It's going to transform. It's going to eat up all these things that we didn't deal with on the 50 days before getting here. And it's going to require us to change. So Moses, you go listen. We'll listen to you, but you go listen to the fiery voice that has the ability to change, to transform, and to consume. And so now you can begin to understand when he tells them to bring this half shekel, this is literally all being embedded in this shadow picture. They're choosing to present themselves before the fiery voice, to be numbered, to be counted, to be considered part of his house. When they brought the half shekel, they were actually offering themselves to be joined back with the one they had been broken off of, each one incomplete without the other. In order for this union to be possible, the fiery voice, the coal, would have to speak into their life, purifying, consuming, transforming them. Do you think maybe this is why they understood in the upper room when they saw the cloven tongues of fire? Wait a minute, my goodness, it's that same voice that we've read about, that we've heard about, that we've studied about for years regarding this particular feast of Shavuot. It's the fiery voice that's here to speak into our lives and consume us, to change us, to transform us. The bringing of the shekel symbolized their willingness for that very act to happen. And I thought it was quite interesting to me because the root word of shekel, shekal, infers to poise or to weigh. But the primary idea is that of suspending on a balance, to suspend as on a cross or crossbeam. Do you think Moshe was shown more than just a coin, a fiery coin? Do you think perhaps he was shown the embodiment of that fiery voice, the one that would be suspended between the two pieces of heaven and earth for the two to become one again? And when I began to look at this, I was reminded, wait a minute, this is the same pattern that Abram shown when he's told, look up into the heavens, count the stars, so shall your seed be. Do you think he also was being shown the same image of one that would be suspended between the pieces for the two to become one again? Could this have been the same picture? The message was always the same. This is the one that you've been taken out of the side of, and this is the one you're to be presented and restored back to. And this is the whole purpose, the culmination of why this covenant's being cut. It's for these two to become one again. When you look at the numerical value of shekel, 430, it's the same value as tohu vabohu, waste and desolate. Once again, indicating something took place to cause this to be broken, to cause this to be damaged, to cause the one to be broken off, and now in a condition that wasn't fit to house that seed, to house that word. But it's interesting because 430 is the number of years of exile and shame that was prophesied to Abram regarding his house as well in Genesis 15. They're going to go into Egypt. 430 years in exile, in bondage, in shame, an unfit vessel to house the voice. And yet in the midst of this, I'm showing you this fiery coin. Why? You're going to be numbered. You're going to be visited. You're going to be counted again. There's going to be an opportunity for restoration. There's going to be an opportunity because one has paid the price for you to once again be joined and walk with him. The two made one. The one who walked between the pieces, entrusting the authority of his name and the responsibility of his house into the hands of his chosen Isha, the menorah who is born out of this. And as we continue to look in this and build on this foundation, when you add the numerical value of these two terms together, menorah, which equals 301, and tanur, this fiery furnace that Abram sees, which has a value of 656, it gives a total numerical value of 957. And it's the same value as the Hebrew phrase or term merah ashotav, seen in Genesis 28:11, and it's translated as pillows, regarding the encounter Jacob has with the ladder. In Genesis 28:11, it says, "And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and he put them for his pillows," this Hebrew word, marah ashotav, "and lay down in that place to sleep." It comes from the root merashot, and it means place at the head, dominion. In other words, when the two become one, when the bride, the menorah, is once again reunited to the source of that fire, whose fire and seed she is holding and a vessel of, when the two become one, they operate in dominion. Or better yet, we become entrusted with operating in his dominion and his authority. And so now you can begin to understand that as Jacob is having this dream, he dreams of the sulam. He dreams of the ladder. It's interesting to me because sulam, ladder, in Hebrew, it's a cognate of the Hebrew term semel, which means image. Literally the manifestation of the face, the Messiah. He sees the ladder. But prior to seeing this ladder, he gathers stones around his head as he prepares to lay down. And Pastor David has done many teachings on this, and it's always struck me because the Hebrew, it's plural. He doesn't just get one rock. Anyway, who's going to use a rock for a pillow? But it's plural. He gets rocks. And so the language seems to infer that he's gathering rocks around his head. Is it possible that he gathered 12 stones around his head following the pattern of the 12 zodiacal houses in the heavens, revealing his understanding of the promises given to Abraham, who was also shown these 12 houses, these 12 stones, when preparing to experience the covenant cutting process? Jacob was entering into a covenant of peace with Yahweh, presenting himself willingly as a vessel through which the heavenly message could be declared on the earth. And when he laid down, willing to present himself, we find that then at this point, it's a promise that you're going to be able to access a place of dominion and authority. And you're going to be able to stand in this place. And from this place, you're going to be able to see the message that was written in the heavens declared on the earth, ruling and reigning and operating in dominion and authority. We find that Yahweh responds to Jacob with revealing his sulam, his ladder. And it's interesting to me because the Hebrew term hasulam, the ladder, it has the same numerical value, 135, as hakol, the voice. Wait a minute, patterns. Wait a minute, connections. Jacob seeing the ladder. Jacob's children, Israel, later are also seeing the ladder. But now it's called hakol. It's the voice. And the root term ladder, sulam, has the same numerical value as Sinai, 130. Israel, the 12 tribes, are the manifestation of those 12 stones intended to become the 12 houses of fire, seen patterned in the constellational zodiacal houses. We find this covenant process in the life of Jacob is continued later. How many realize that he's promised dominion? He's promised authority. He's promised covenant. He's the chosen son. He's the one that has the blessing, the inheritance. He leaves his father's house under the charge to go and to find a bride, to find a helpmeet. Why? To function together regarding the building of the house, the covenant promise, the inheritance, the blessings. And guess where he goes? Laban's house. Laban is the same root that means to make bricks. It's also where Israel was sent. Why? There's a season of learning. There's a season of growing. There's a season of maturity. Yes, you have the promise. Yes, there's an inheritance. Yes, there's a position of authority and dominion, but you will never access it without spending that good old season in Laban's house. Why? In Laban's house, Jacob had to grow. He had to understand some things. How many realize that you won't understand and learn certain lessons until you're put in some adverse circumstances? And in the midst of those adverse circumstances, in the midst of what it feels like, good Lord, I'm in bondage. Man, this is rough. Why am I having to do this? This man's cheating. He's lying. He's doing all manner of stuff. And yet Jacob had a promise. Jacob has a promised inheritance. Jacob has been promised a position at a place of authority and dominion. But he had to understand, you got to walk this out first. You got to learn these lessons. You got to begin to put them into practice. And then when Jacob leaves Laban's house, now you can begin to operate in that authority. Now you can begin to operate and understand how to build the house, because you've spent time at the bottom of the barrel of that house. You've spent time learning and understanding, my goodness, look what happens when the house isn't built correctly. Look what happens when an individual, Laban, is in charge. And now he begins to understand that's not the way that Yahweh wants to build his house. And so he leaves, and maybe certain characteristics that Jacob left with, they've been shaved off. They've been worn down. He's been shaped. He's been molded. That's the same thing that's supposed to happen to Israel in Egypt. It's the same thing that's supposed to happen to you and I. Isn't it interesting that before the bride is revealed at the very end of the book of Revelation, she's sent to a place prepared for her. It's called the wilderness. She's sent to a place that's not only been prepared for her, it's a place of sanctuary. It's a place of protection, but it's also a place of transformation. It's also a place where that fiery voice is going to speak to her, because it indicates her garments still have a little bit more pressing and working to do prior to now being recognized and presented as the one who's made herself ready. We find this covenant process in the life of Jacob. He's promised it here in Genesis 28. He sees the ladder. He has an encounter, but he doesn't see it fully manifested till later. We find that Yahweh reiterates this promise and revisits it in Genesis chapter 32 when Jacob has another encounter. I remember Jacob's encounters usually leave him marked in some form or way. There's a change that takes place. In Genesis 32, Jacob's thigh is touched, his urek. His walk is required to change if he seeks to access this place of dominion and authority. How many realize it's not something entrusted to just anyone or haphazardly? And we find that this is the message of Shavuot, the purpose of the Omer count, to change our walk, to be ready to access that place, to be able to be one that's a proper helpmeet. We find that in order for Jacob's walk to be changed, he wrestled. That's how we know we're some of the lost tribes. We have a problem too with that. Whenever Yahweh says, I need you to change this, I want you to deal with this, our usual response is, I don't think so. And so we wrestle with that. And yet we're not the first one, because now we look, Jacob wrestled regarding this. The term used here is abak, Strong's number 79, to wrestle, to grapple. But it also means to pound or to make small. It shares the same root stem, the beit kuf, as the term beka, to divide, to cleave asunder, to break open, or to burst forth. And it indicates splitting or dividing with force. It's the same term that indicates half a shekel, the beka. You're the pieces. You want to walk different? You want to be entrusted with authority? You want to be used to build up his house? The example of Jacob teaches us that it will require every aspect of the carnal-minded man to be pounded small. A forceful divide, as every aspect of our heart is sifted and inspected, and the fiery torch walks between the pieces of our very identity, because there's no place for pride, there's no place for self, there's no place for the old man. And from this is born the bride, the helpmeet, the menorah, the one capable of shining, not her light, his light. She's the vessel, and it shines through. And in the midst of all that, in the midst of that experience, in the midst of being forcefully divided, the ground being plowed up, how many of us, it's not comfortable. When the pounding of the carnal man, the fleshly mindset has to be dealt with, it's a very uncomfortable place to be in. And yet the pattern reveals to you that in the midst of that, in the midst when the pressure almost seems unbearable, you can say, it is well with my soul. Why? Because on the horizon, I understand what you're doing. I understand that you're shaping me and molding me because you're not finished with me. I understand that there's a set destination on the horizon, and all of this has been designed to lead me to that set destination. And so now, even in the midst of it, when it first happens and you begin to complain, I'm able to catch, wait a minute. This too is good. This too is for a purpose. And maybe those seasons of complaining and whining and grumbling are getting shorter. Maybe when we initially feel the discomfort and things begin to happen, it kind of leaks out. But then we're able to cut it off faster and say, no, I'm understanding, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm maturing. I'm shema'ing. I'm learning to hear, to listen, to be obedient, and to understand. Now, as we continue to look at this, the first reference of the term Shavuot that's in regard to this Moedim, the first time it's called Shavuot is in Exodus chapter 34, verse 22 through 23. And it tells them to observe the feast. I'm in the wrong spot. In Exodus chapter 34, verse 22, it says, "And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. Thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before Yahweh Elohim, the God of Israel." And I wanted to take a short time to look at that term observe. He says, observe this feast. And when you read this whole passage, the feast that he's talking about, he doesn't list all 7, he lists 3. It's the 3 pilgrimage feasts, the chagim, the feast, the ones that you are required to appear at. These 3 you will observe. The word observe is Strong's number 6213, asa, and it means to do, to fashion, accomplish, make, to attend to put in order. It's quite interesting because this term is first seen in Genesis 1 as one of the creative verbs, asa. It implies putting the final touches on something that allows its original purpose to be completed. It establishes boundaries and expectations. And so now you can begin to understand, my goodness, when I observe this feast, when we come along and we're now functioning as that proper helpmeet, what's happening is that it's allowing the original purpose for that which you were created to begin to be seen, to begin to be released. It establishes boundary lines and expectations in your life. To better understand this concept, when looking in Genesis 1, it was interesting to me that the items that are asa, because there's 3 terms regarding creation, verbs that he uses in the Hebrew language. He uses this term asa to describe how he creates the firmament in verse 7. The trees who are to asa yield fruit after their kind in verse 11 through 12. the two great lights in verse 16, the beast of the earth after its kind in verse 25, and finally man, Asah, in verse 26. We find that the trees, the beasts, the animals, and man are all seed carriers who will reproduce after his kind. They were intended to multiply, to continue, to yield fruit, to have children, to reproduce after their kind. And it seems to provide a clue that the great lights placed in the firmament will function in a similar role as seed carriers, repositories, charged with reproducing or multiplying, in the sense that they literally have embedded within them the seed or the word of Yahweh. They're to reveal the redemption message. And yet in Genesis chapter 2, we find that Adam is unable to find a proper helpmeet to aid him in this task to fully accomplish his purpose. Let's look at the term helpmeet. It's Strong's number 5828 and 5048, etzer kenegdo. The term etzer indicates to help, to gird, to surround, defend, support, or aid. We find that this verb is most often used in military situations during battle, describing the role of an indispensable pillar. The same letters rearranged form the term zerah, seed. And yet the woman has no seed of her own, indicating that her role is to help support, defend, guard, and surround the seed that she's been entrusted with. She becomes the indispensable pillar in the midst of the pitched battle, where the enemy's sole goal is to see that seed, that promise, that sent word cut off. And so now you can understand that only in the role of a husband and wife, she's the indispensable pillar. She's your sustenance, your source, your helpmeet in the midst of a pitched battle, but also collectively as the bride, the etzer kenegdo of Messiah. How many of you realize our goal is to ensure that the word that he deposited within your care is not cut off? And yet the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He comes for the word's sake. And so now you can understand she's given this terminology. Why? Because she's going to need to function in this role. There's going to be seasons where there's a pitched battle regarding the cutting off of that word, and her role is to protect that word and declare it and say, no, it will flourish, it will produce. Next, the phrase kenegdo indicates what's in front of, a counterpart, to tell or make known, announce, publish, or expound. We find that she's charged with declaring, making known, publishing, and announcing the seed or the word that she, as the bride, collectively, you and I, have been entrusted with, ensuring that it's not cut off or fruitless. It's no accident that this phrase, etzer kenegdo, has a numerical value of 360. It's the number of days of Yahweh's covenant calendar circuit. And as we continue to look at this, can you connect the dots? Do you think his circuit reveals the etzer kenegdo, the bride? While simultaneously it functions in this role or pattern as well, it's a womb, it's a helpmeet. Why? It declares, it voices, it reveals the seed or word that was etched in the heavens, but now it's being made manifest on the earth. And the etzer kenegdo, what was Abraham told, so shall your seed be? Count the stars. That's your role. You're supposed to be a repository of the seed. You should declare. In Psalms, it talks about there's not a place on earth where their voice is not heard, where the message in the heavens isn't seen, and it hasn't been kept and guarded. And so we find the etzer kenegdo, the bride, is the one who appears. Why? To publish, to declare, to give voice to the message at the set time, ensuring it's known. It becomes an identifying factor of who is in fact the proper helpmeet. Hence the reason we are to asah, to observe these feasts. We're the other half, who must be presented to become echad with the one who we've been taken out of, the Messiah, to enable the original purpose to be fruitful, to walk in dominion, to be completed. And I thought it was interesting because this term asah, observe this feast, has a numerical value of 375, and it's the same value as ha-mashal, to rule or ruled, from the root mashal, to rule, to have dominion, to reign. What has this all been about? Shavuot's about entrusting someone with authority, dominion, power, having access to this place. When you observe this feast, it indicates there's the releasing of mashal, authority, power, dominion. And yet this root mashal, this same root stem can infer to make like, to assimilate, to resemble, or to represent. And finally, it can also indicate a weighty saying or parable or a prophetic utterance. This numerical connection then identifies what happens when we observe these feasts. Not just appear that day. I made it. I picked up that calendar just in time. And I realized it's time to be here. Not just appear, not just happen to be there when it's time. Looking, talking, and acting like the same way you did when you left Egypt, but arriving in the capacity as one who's identified as a proper helpmeet, capable of giving voice to the prophetic utterances. Why? Because your own life, your own walk has assimilated that word. It cannot be separated from you. So shall your seed be. It literally has become who you are. It's formed you, it's shaped you, and now when you arrive, you're identified as one that can be trusted with the dominion, who can rule in authority alongside. Why? Because you resemble him. Adam had all of creation paraded before him, and he says, none of them look like me. None of them are a proper helpmeet. None of them have the mindset, the characteristics, the direction, the intention, the charge that I've been given. How many realize how often has the Messiah had paraded before? We show up, here we are. But does he look and does he see one that's a proper helpmeet, or does he just see the beasts of the field? Does he just see the characteristics of one that's still governed and ruled by the fleshly, carnal nature? Or does he see one, wait a minute, I can see my mind has been deposited into that. They've renewed their mind. They've taken on the mind of Messiah. They look like me. The purpose of Shavuot. Now let's take a look at this term, weeks. Shavuot itself, it's the Feast of Weeks. Weeks is Strong's number 7620, Shavuot, 7, a period of 7, a week. It comes from the root shavah, to swear, to adjure, to take an oath, to bind with an oath or covenant cutting. It can also infer to make something sufficient for the purpose it was intended for. From the context, it's easy to see Shavuot's direct connection to Israel entering into covenant with Yahweh, the giving of the Torah, all of this being interwoven with this feast. Yet it's also revealing that at Shavuot, at the end of that 50-day period, on that 50th day, it's the divine appointment when we are now seen as sufficient for the purpose in which we were created and intended for. In other words, all of this led to this moment where he could say, well done. In fact, the two-letter root, the shin beit of Shavuot or Shavuot, it indicates to return, to repent, to restore. It's the root of teshuvah, meaning to return or restore to one's former or original place or state. And it's interesting to me that teshuvah is connected to his timing language, his calendar language, if you will, because the start of the year is the teshuvah. Why? Because the Moedim, the feast that you're going to go through this year as you make this entire circuit, it's revealing the path and the pattern of teshuvah, the path of your return. Passover reveals the plan of our redemption and deliverance, but that's only the beginning. The entire circuit reveals the purpose and the plan. Throughout the entire circuit, you see the fiery one walking between the pieces, our Messiah. And we find that it voices the entire journey of restoration. Yes, he walked between the pieces, but why? It reveals it through the rest of the pattern to produce an Isha, a menorah that would be capable of housing his light, his seed, his word. This is the purpose that you were created and intended for. And so when he begins to tell you Shavuot, and it's directly connected to this restoration, he wants you to understand this center shaft. All of this is hinging. This is what's upholding all of this. This is the purpose of it. This is what you were created for. Now, when looking closer at the word picture found within the name Shavuot, it contains the root word Shabbat. Inserted within is the letter ayin. It's the eye, to see, to discern. We're commanded to count 7 Sabbaths leading up to Shavuot. At Shavuot, when we present ourselves, the one that we present ourselves before, what does he do? He looks, he inspects back over those 7 Sabbaths, those 7 weeks. Have those 7 weeks brought change, transformation, growth, maturity? Am I more capable, trustworthy, patient, discerning, faithful today than I was when I started? Or am I worse off due to fighting against the very situations meant to make me grow? I would say when we look at the example given in the scriptures, Israel, when they stood at Shavuot, technically were worse off than when they left Egypt. It was evidenced by every stop. It was evidenced by every inconvenience. It was evidenced by every single time there was a slight moment where they were told to wait, to be patient, to just trust in Yahweh, and yet they complained. And yet they fought against it, and they rejected it, and they didn't want it. And so they were worse off 50 days later than they were at the beginning. And yet we find these patterns continue. Why? It's the path of teshuvah. It's the path of restoration. We may not get it the first cycle. We may not get it the first 40 years in the cycle. But eventually, there's a generation that will understand the pattern and present themselves. Now, let's continue to look at these verses here in Exodus 34. Shavuot is one of these 3 pilgrimage feasts. In the King James, it says thrice. Thrice a year. 3 times a year, you're to present yourself. In Hebrew, it's Strong's number 6471, pa'am. And it's translated as stroke, beat, foot, step, anvil, occurrence, or footsteps. It can indicate a specific cadence, a beat, time, measure of rhythmical motion or activity. It's first seen in Genesis chapter 2, verse 23, and Adam said, "This is now pa'am, bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, Isha, because she was taken out of man." Could the purpose of the pilgrimage feasts, Shavuot being one of them, be to identify the Isha? He could have used the word for 3. Hebrew has a word for 3 times. Instead, he uses the term pa'am. The connection to footsteps cannot be ignored. She was identified by her walk. She was in sync, on beat, keeping the same set time and sequence. She had the same mindset. She had the same agenda. She had the same destination. Pa'am has the same numerical value, 190, as Selah, rib, and Salah, to halt, the way Jacob walked after his encounter. Now, as we prepare to close, there's one more significant passage to take a look at, and it's what Messiah himself said regarding Shavuot. In Luke chapter 24, verse 49, it says, "And behold, I send the promise of my Father upon you. But tarry ye in the city of Jerusalem until ye be endued with power from on high." And a lot of times in the Christian community, they've looked at this and they like Pentecost. That's about authority. That's about power. I'm going to be empowered. I'll keep that feast. And yet, when we understand this was not a new event, they understood. He's telling us to wait for Shavuot. Something's about to happen at Shavuot. We've read in the scriptures, we've heard in the synagogue about this day, what happened at Sinai when the voice that's now walking among us made an appearance. And so do you think that they were anticipating and understanding, my goodness, we're about to experience something that has not been seen since that moment? Let's look at the term that's used to describe it. You'll be endued with power. The term power in the Greek is dunamis, and it means strength, power, ability. Yet the Hebrew equivalents of this Greek term are quite intriguing. It's tied to several Hebrew words. One, chayil, Strong's number 2428, strength, might, efficiency, wealth. Chayil is seen in the phrase the eshet chayil, the woman of virtue, the woman of valor, Proverbs 31. Chayil Kail comes from the root kul, meaning to whirl, to twist, to turn around, to dance in a circle. And it's directly connected to the circle of Yahweh's calendar, his Moedim, his feast, the way of keeping time. Could the Eshet Kail, the woman of valor, strength, efficiency, be recognized as such due to the fact that she whirls, she dances in this circuit? Referencing that she follows or walks in the same circle as her husband, his 360-day feast calendar, where she's obedient to meet with him at each moed, and therefore, because of the access that she has to him, she finds her strength, her power, she's endued with dunamis. She's the bride who is the counterpart of the groom. The next Hebrew word connection of dunamis is yatsah. And it means to go in or come out. It indicates to go forth with purpose, but it also carries the idea of going forth into captivity or exile. Do you realize that there are times that we've approached and we've entered the feast cycles, we've come and we've presented ourselves before him, but because we didn't understand the pattern and we didn't take the time, we didn't take the 50 days to be prepared, that perhaps that now when we presented ourselves and we exit, we actually send ourselves back into captivity, back into a season of exile. Why? Because he looks and says, my goodness, you didn't grow. My goodness, this is still there. There's still some lessons. There's still some seasons in the wilderness that you have to endure. And yet this terminology also indicates that the one that walks in dunamis, that when they have this entrusted to them, they'll go forth with purpose. How many realize that you're not going to be entrusted with his authority to just waste it or to use it for selfish means? You're to go forth with purpose. You're to go forth to see the exile and the captivity rolled back from others, from off of creation. Romans tells us that the entire earth, Joy said it earlier, it's groaning, waiting for the manifestations of the ones capable of walking in dunamis power to see the exile, the captivity, the bondage rolled back. To become the hands entrusted with bringing the Jubilee, the Yovel, to all of creation. How many realize that immature, selfish, carnal-minded individuals are incapable of doing this? We see it in our own lives. When we're in that place, when that's our mindset, we put ourselves in a place of captivity. Your mind becomes your biggest prison, first and foremost. And yet when we begin to renew our mind, when we begin to change the way we think, when we begin to change the way we speak, the way we walk, my goodness, it's as if you're coming out of a place of captivity. It's as if exile, you're being restored from that place. The last Hebrew word connection that we'll focus on with dunamis is Allah. And it means to go, to ascend, to climb, to be elevated or exalted, but it's specifically connected to the olah or whole burnt offering. When this dunamis came upon the people, they were to be seen, it was as if they had become an olah offering, an entirely fully consumed offering made by fire, presented before him. And as the coal, the voice began to speak, it completely consumed who they were. And instead of seeing the individual, now he sees the one that's the menorah, the light, the one that is emanating, that looks like him, that carries his light. And it was amazing to me that before the disciples ever assembled in the upper room at Shavuot to receive the dunamis, the power, the authority, the ability to go out and see creation set free, another individual understood the patterns and was willing to be the pieces that the Messiah walked between in order to see her own restoration. In Luke chapter 8, verses 43 through 46, we're told, and a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her issue of blood stopped. And Yeshua said, who touched me? When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude throngs thee and presses thee, and sayest thou, who touched me? And Yeshua said, somebody has touched me. For I perceive that virtue, dunamis, is gone out of me. A lot of times we show up at the feast, at Shabbat, We enter his presence and we're here to encounter you. We're here to touch you. And yet we're just like the throngs of the individuals of people that are all pressing him. And yet there's never a moment that there's a difference, that there's a release of the virtue, the dunamis, the power to an individual that was ready and desperate for that encounter. And so we can say we encountered him, we had an encounter with him, but there was something different about this woman because she understood the pattern. She understood that if I can just touch him, I can be restored. I can be changed. She understood the price. I'm willing to be the pieces. I'm willing to allow the fire of your word and your authority and your power and your very identity to walk in the midst of this because what I've got's not good anyway. I'm at the end of it all. I've got nothing left. You can have it all. And so we find that when she touches him, there was something different about the way she approached him that it got his attention. And when we look back, I thought, my goodness, when was the last time I came before your presence and I was able to touch you in such a way that it got your attention apart from everybody else that you asked, my goodness, who was that? The Greek term for touch there is aptomai, and it means to fasten oneself to adhere to cling to, and it can infer to kindle or set on fire. She was willing to become an offering that was set on fire. Consume me, transform me, burn up all the dross, whatever it takes. You're my hope. You're my promise. You're the one that I intend to cling to and to fasten myself to. And we find that this becomes the most beautiful, powerful picture that you can ever present and teach regarding Shavuot. Just this woman. The disciples in the upper room, that was a powerful encounter. They prepared themselves, they understood, but before they ever understood the lesson, how many times was Yeshua constantly telling them how to take them aside? Let me explain it to you. You still don't get it? It's okay, I'm gonna break it down. I'm gonna explain this to you so you understand. And we find that in the upper room, they finally get it, but this woman understood without that. Why? Her wilderness years, the years spent wandering around, the years spent alone, the years spent in that place had finally changed her and she was ready. And so if you get absolutely nothing else out of the teaching, out of this season, out of the counting of the Omer, one thing that I feel like he's begun to speak to me and for me to understand is don't despise the wilderness. Understand the wilderness. The midbar is the place where the voice speaks. Outside of the wilderness, it's easy. There's tons of voices. There's all these things clamoring at you, things for your attention. But he takes you to the wilderness. Why? Because now it's just you and him. And everything that he's trying to show and deliver and bring out, it's going to come out in the wilderness. And the wilderness may not be pretty. The wilderness may not be a fun, exciting experience, but the wilderness is necessary. Why? Because it's where you'll finally listen. It's where he speaks to us. And if you'll allow him to speak to you, then you too will be like that woman. You'll be adhered. You'll touch him in such a way that it will get his attention and you'll be transformed. But also, not only did it affect her, it affects her entire house. She now goes forth as a vessel that has that deposited in her. And so I don't know about you, but I want to be one that's considered part of that company that's made herself ready, that has her garments pressed, that's wearing the proper attire, that has spent the time listening, being transformed. And now when she stands before him, he says, my goodness, she looks like me. She's ready to be entrusted with the very thing that they were created for. Amen. Shabbat shalom.